Hi there. So in today's video, I'm going to go over some of the common misconceptions about gray hair that I've seen and heard floating out there. This is by no means an exhaustive list of things that I've seen out there about gray hair, but some of the more common ones that I have seen or heard or read or whatever. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Michelle. I'm a licensed hairstylist with over 20 years of experience, and on this channel, I use those 20 years of experience to help you have healthy, happy hair. And I also happen to be somebody who has a fair amount of gray hair. And you can see, because I haven't colored it in quite some time, that I've got some roots, and I've got some up here. And I'm making this video partly because of wanting to set straight some of the misconceptions, but also in honor of the fact that I have decided I am going to stop coloring my hair and let my silvers do their thing, come in, grow out. So I'm going to be going without color, which will be the first time since cosmetology school, which is when I started coloring my hair. And I actually started coloring my hair before I saw my first gray, which my first gray was when I was 21 years old. And I've had roughly the same amount of gray since I was about 26. It really hasn't increased much since then. I've been in kind of a holding pattern, but I did gray early. And that is going to be one of the first misconceptions about gray hair, is that it is solely related to age. It is not. Some people have it in their family. It's a genetic thing where they gray early. My dad grayed early. I grayed early. My daughter has already seen gray hairs since turning 19. So she is very likely going to be graying early as well. So gray hair is, like I said, not necessarily related to age. It can be genetics, it can be stress. There are other things that can bring on gray hair, not just the age factor. So another common misconception about gray hair, and this is probably an even bigger one than the age one, because I think people are starting to realize it's not necessarily connected to age. But this one is a very big one that I hear all the time, and that is that gray hair is wiry. That it's coarse, that it's wiry, unruly, any of those things. And that can be true. However, just like pigmented hair is incredibly diverse, so is gray hair, which is essentially non-pigmented hair. So you can have gray hair that is coarse and wiry and unruly, but you can also have a gray hair that is really fine and really soft and really conditioned and is the complete opposite of coarse and wiry. And over the course of my 20-year career as a hairdresser, I have seen very fine, soft, fluffy, light as a feather gray hair. And I have seen the coarse wiry, and I've seen everything in between. So gray hair does not automatically mean it is going to be wiry and sticking up all over the place. It really depends on each individual person, just like your pigmented hair is different with each individual person. Another misconception about gray hair is that your gray hair is going to be different from your pigmented hair. It can. So, as with many misconceptions, they sometimes are rooted in a little bit of fact, and then they're just generalized out. And that's the case with most of these, is that, yes, gray hair can be these things, but it's not necessarily these things for absolutely every single person. And that's the same with this one as well. You might have gray hair that has a different texture, or might even be straight and the rest of your hair is curly, or it's curly and the rest of your hair is straight, or some kind of wonkiness thereof, wavy and it's going curly, or it was curly, now it's going wavy. It can be anything, but it can also be exactly the same thing as your pigmented hair, just without the pigment, which is basically what my hair is. My gray hair is no different than the rest of my hair on my head. It is just as coarse as everything else, and it has the same level of porosity. It's not any different in texture or even in curl pattern, because the stuff that is up here where my curlier hair is just as curly as the rest of it. And the stuff that's underneath here, that's where I have more of my wavy hair. My gray hair is wavy just like the rest of it. So my hair has not changed, and I'm not just speaking about my hair as well, but after working on so many heads of hair and seeing people for years, I had clients that came to me for years. So started with me when I first started my career and followed me throughout. And so I saw their hair as it went through all of these changes, and saw many people through their first gray hairs to almost a full head of gray hair. So I can say that I have seen it go from one thing to something completely different. And I have seen it go from one thing to exactly the same thing, minus the color. And that's it. So that can be completely different for every single person. And now I mentioned porosity, and that is another misconception about gray hair, is that it acts like high porosity hair. Not necessarily. Again, it could, and it can be high porosity. It can also be low porosity. It can be somewhere in the middle, but just because it's gray doesn't mean it automatically behaves like high porosity hair. Just like everything else I've already mentioned, it greatly depends on each individual. It can behave like a different porosity level than the rest of your hair, or it can behave exactly like the rest of your hair. It can be any porosity level, just like pigmented hair. So that one is not necessarily true. But again, it can be true. You can have gray hair that behaves like high porosity hair, most likely because it probably is a bit high porosity hair. So another one that I've seen a little bit here and there, however, not as much as maybe some of the other things, is that gray hair is really fragile and needs to be treated completely differently. And that there needs to be extra care for gray hair, or care differently for gray hair. And again, maybe, as with everything that I've already said, it can be, but it might also not be. Another thing you need to take into consideration is whether or not it's the fact that your hair is gray, and that's why it seems to be more fragile, or it needs a little extra TLC, or because as we age and the health of our bodies begin to deteriorate, many people as they get older, they also have health conditions. They take medications for those health conditions. For women, menopause can definitely change your hair. So maybe instead of it being because your hair is gray, it's coinciding with some of these things, and that's what's changing your hair, not the fact that it's actually turning gray. So it could be your health, it could be your medications, it could be your hormones, because anything that's going on in your body, anything that you put into it, comes out onto your hair. So it could be that a slew of health problems or medications in order to help those health problems are causing some of those issues, like I said, or your hormones are changing and your hair is changing because of your hormones. So it's not necessarily 100% because of your gray hair that you need to treat it differently. It could just be something that's happening overall. However, it could also be that your gray hair is more fragile. Again, this is all depending on each individual. Using my own hair as an example, there is nothing fragile about my gray hair. There is nothing fragile about my mother's gray hair. She has even coarser hair than I do. My dad's hair is slightly finer than mine. There is nothing fragile about his all white head of hair. I have had many clients. Some have had fragile gray hair, but then also whatever pigmented hair they had left was also fragile. So to me, that suggests health issues or hormone issues or something like that. And then I have had clients who their gray hair was more fragile, partially because it came in more fine, and fine hair is definitely more fragile than coarser hair. So yes, gray hair can be more fragile, but there's a lot of other reasons why it could be fragile. It could be, like I said, because it's a little finer, or it could be because of health issues, could be because of hormones, but it is not necessarily 100% because of gray, and just because you have gray hair that it is going to automatically be more fragile and something that you have to take very special care of. So what does all this mean for you? Because now that I've basically said that your gray hair can be pretty much anything, it means that you just need to look at it very similarly to how you look at your pigmented hair, is assess it for what it is. See what the texture is, check out what your porosity is, determine whether or not it does feel like it's constantly dry, or if it gets built up really quickly, or if it is on the more wiry side, chances are it probably just needs like some more emollient products to really help condition and soften the hair so that it isn't being really wiry and unruly as it's growing in. So while this doesn't give you any sort of definitive answers on how to care for your gray hair, it does let you know that gray hair in and of itself is not this completely different entity that needs to be treated differently than your pigmented hair. It just needs to be assessed to determine whether or not it is different than your pigmented hair and what its properties are so that you can give your hair what it needs. For myself, I have roughly 30-ish% gray to my hair. My hair, like I said, my gray hair is very similar to the rest of it. Even if it wasn't, I'm not going to treat 30% of my hair completely different than the rest of my hair. That's just not a realistic thing to do, especially because, you know, gray kind of shows up here, there, and everywhere, wherever it feels like it. So if you find that your gray hair is drastically different than your pigmented hair, perhaps find a middle ground between the two that makes both types of hair somewhat happy, or maybe makes them equally unhappy. It's probably not exactly the ideal solution, but finding something that'll work for both hairs. Or if you do have like high concentrations of gray like I do here at my sides, you can certainly treat those differently if you want to. So in conclusion, your gray hair can be pretty much anything, and you need to figure out what it is in order to give it what it needs, just the same way that you do with your pigmented hair. So hopefully I've shed some light on some of the common misconceptions about gray hair and maybe taken away some of the confusion if you were noticing that your gray hair isn't behaving like everybody says that it should be behaving according to the common misconceptions out there, and you've been struggling to figure it out. Hopefully this helped you with that. If so, then I have definitely accomplished my goal. If you like this video, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more content like this, please go ahead and hit the subscribe, hit that notification bell while you're at it. If you have any questions, any comments, or anything that you'd like to see, please go ahead and leave those down below in my comment section. And as always, thank you for watching. Bye.